Wow, who would have thought it? I certainly did not see that coming. Can you tell that this intro was pre-recorded? That and the fact the sprint takes place at 3 AM and I can't possibly go up the ladder without waking everyone in the house up. So in the immortal words of any member of the Ferrari pit wall, we must do plan B, and that being, of course, the bunker. Well, how about that? Lewis Hamilton proved the doubters wrong, including myself somewhat, and went to win the 2025 Chinese sprint. This is the kind of rebound that I was really hoping would happen. In that video, I talked about his, less than great, disappointing debut. This should start a really helpful process for him to be able to get himself off on the right foot and maybe just prove to us all that 2025 isn't all said and done. Maybe the rules about the flexi wings on the rear wing at the moment, because we'll get the front wings eventually, might actually provide us close competitive racing. Because even though I was really surprised that the McLarens weren't just romping away with it, and Lando Norris actually cutting his way through the field, and we'll get to that in a moment, because I'm not gonna lie, that was absolutely shocking. We just got to talk about the importance of the sprint itself. Now, this is exactly what I thought a sprint would be like from the Formula 2 part of the paddock, where you do have to manage the tyres, that you have to be really careful when you use them, when you don't use them, when you charge things up. This is where I was thinking that out of the top three, Piastri is the only one who has relative experience in the current regulations of Formula 2. So that might have actually stood him in good stead to be able to get that pass against Max Verstappen. And yes, he probably realised that he wasn't going to be catching Lewis Hamilton up, or if he tried to, then he would have baked his tyres. Max might have just got back past him. But hey, the fact that his teammate could barely get into the points, I think Oscar will take that. It's more of a statement thing. I think it is just more of a realignment when it comes to the overall order at McLaren, because let's be real, the whole position angle, it's somehow become muddied that even if it was with the best of intentions, it really produced a not so great outcome with one of their drivers being spooked by it. But needless to say, that top three was an absolute barnstormer. And I'm really, really pleased to see Hamilton holding off Verstappen, Piastri duking it out with Max and keeping it clean, and Max actually being relatively circumspect. This is something I've really seen throughout the entire weekend. Hamilton being extremely punchy, and Max just being like, okay, just shrugging, just being rather zen. I guess becoming a dad in the not too distant future does that to you. I mean, I speak from experience. It does change your mindset in a way, and maybe this is sort of happening in real time with Verstappen. Who knows? This podium was a fantastic means to just try and get people hyped up for the season. People were worrying that McLaren would just walk away with it, and admittedly, I'm not so much of a big fan of this McLaren, who may be considered in some circles as overconfident. I am rather used to a McLaren who is rather, introspective, rather modest, and what's the word? Pragmatic, that's it. And what this does show really is that there is still some work to be done, and we are going to have a really strong competitive season, and that is going to be the really good part of this all. Let's just talk about George Russell briefly, because no one was really talking about him, yet he was able to hold on to his position. He almost got onto the back of Max, but then he had some wobbles as well. Charles Leclerc, he was nowhere on the radio. His front tyres were absolutely cooked, and he had no answer to pretty much anything, honestly, and he was stuck behind George, and I think Russell will take this. And Antonelli, the only rookie scoring points in a sprint. And then guess who was in front of him? One Yuki Tsunoda, doing a fantastic job, capitalizing, I think, the most on Norris's mistake, exactly what he needed to do to try and really highlight to people what's going on over with Red Bull. And that video that I put out yesterday, which a lot of people were quite interested in, let's just say that. Tsunoda did the business, and in a midfield contest where Williams weren't looking quite as strong this weekend, and it just reaffirms in my mind that Yuki is just like a sponge, the good kind of sponge, in that every single teammate that he's had, he has taken an element out of. And so far, I have not seen any sign of the angry Yuki that we've been used to, because there was a moment where I think one of the drivers was turning into him in turn 14 back in practice, and he just got, someone turned into me at turn 14. he was relatively calm about it. He didn't fly off the handle or anything. I would like to think that Ricciardo did his part in trying to add that little extra bit of nuance, diplomacy, just kind of just being a bit more grounded. And that was probably one of the great gifts that Daniel could have given him, just being able to rein him in, take it down a notch. There were so many narratives going on up and down the field, and Antonelli, again, I know that he should have realistically got past Yuki Tsunoda because a Mercedes versus a racing bull. Surely the Silver Arrow might have been able to just get past down that particular straight. Naturally, though, the sprint is a battle of attrition. You have to use your tyres rather carefully. And it was really paining me to remember that because I was just telling Oscar, close them down! Close them down! And it still keeps Mercedes in the contention for the constructors. Yes, of course, the race is coming in just a few hours' time. And of course, I will be doing my winners and losers as soon as I possibly can. But the reality is that this is really good for Mercedes. Even though it's not them being right at the front, they are still somewhere in the mix for some valuable points, which is more than could have been said for the last 2 years. So having Antonelli there as a good backup to George is rather splendid for the likes of Toto. And this is all coming in the midst of Christian and Zach fighting amongst themselves. Zach going, oh, Red Bull's not a good place to work. No, 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 no. And Christian's going, oh, that's Zach. He's having a go, and I don't like it when he's having a go. And Toto's in the middle of it just going, oh, this whole next thing, leave me out of this. And I think Lando would want people to leave him out of all this stuff because, my goodness, this was probably the most shocking display that I could have seen in this sprint. Lawson even managed to make progress from 20th to 14th. Granted, it's a Red Bull. You should be able to make progress relatively quickly. Lando was making mistakes where he didn't need to. As Martin Brundle pointed out, he went wide when he didn't need to go wide. And it's in a very similar position as to where he had some mistakes before. I hope that in the Grand Prix, it does convert itself into better prospects and better fortunes for the Brit. But the fact, though, is that Piastri was able to keep it together. He didn't make any mistakes. He preserved his tyres. He's even able to pass Max Verstappen, both men having not really fought each other before. In the heat of the moment, they were able to make it good. And it really helped that Max was just realising, yeah, I'm not going to be able to get past this. Piastri got an overtake done, whereas Lando didn't. Well, not until the absolute bleeding end. And Lance Stroll was the person he was battling, and the Canadian was able to keep him behind. I expect fully that circles of the internet will be lapping this up, even though it was a bit of a surprise outcome. This was just something bizarre. I mean, you got to look at Lance and you just think, well, I don't know what he's imbibing, but yeah, whatever it is, he's actually holding his own, and he's vaguely around the same area as Fernando Alonso, which is a surprise. But at least Aston Martin's coming to the actual events, and they've got a car which is better than they probably expected. And who's to say whether or not they might decide to divert some resources of Adrian Newey, get his beady eye on it every now and again, and just say, oh, that's good. No, don't do that. Just head them off at the pass. So maybe those fundamental upgrades that they usually bring to Imola, that could be really important later on in the season. It really depends on how they want to utilize Adrian. Lewis Hamilton, and I'm really glad that the rebound has been so rapid and that he has been able to dig himself deep and become really, really feisty as well. And that's really, really good. Even though sometimes he does bring Max into it when sometimes he needn't do. But at least there is a fire in his belly, which is something I think a lot of people were wanting, especially Formula One fans, because this is going to do the world of good for the entire sport, to see a Lewis not down on his luck and punchy and fighting, especially for anyone coming in the last few years, Max Verstappen, and winning. That's exactly what people are going to want to see. Charles Leclerc is going to have a bit of a time of it. That Piastri is now reasserting himself at McLaren, so that team orders debate, the papaya rules, is really going to evolve as we see the season progress. Verstappen, even though he is able to work wonders with that machine, this is very much turning into a slightly better version of the season that Fernando Alonso had in 2012, when that Ferrari was not the best. In fact, you could easily argue it was one of the worst in the front-running pack, and yet he was still able to mount a championship bid. This is going to be one of those seasons where a lot of people who didn't really think much of Max Verstappen before then go to him, see what he's doing with that car and what Liam Lawson isn't doing in that car, kind of like how Massa couldn't really get as much done with that Ferrari, and go, oh, fundamentally, he's a really good driver. And I think he will win a lot of fans that way, especially with the way that he's conducting himself. He's really, really matured. He's not lost any competitive spirit on the track, but with the media pens, he's really just keeping a measured outlook on everything. That was absolutely splendid to see. Now, of course, also, we got to talk about people further down the field. And one person that really stood out to me, and this was really, really impressive, was one... Oh no, okay. Okay. For a second there, I thought they were thinking I breached containment. Isaac Hadjar was really, really spicy from him. And with him in sprint qualifying, helping out his mate when he himself made a mistake and he couldn't get any higher than 15th, he helping out Yuki Tsunoda, getting into Q3, or SQ3, and then that converting into P6, Isaac could take some credit in that he is being a real team player. This is really raising my estimations on the little Frenchman, that he is really starting to get it. And this was a really good moment for him to really prove himself and just try and put the incidents of last time out behind him, even though, admittedly, he did win a lot of fans that weekend. But now he might win some more for his racing skills. He was feisty, he was punchy, and I must admit, many people assumed when they saw that little bit of debris just flying off a car, people were expecting that to be Hadjar as he was trying to make some overtakes. Him fighting Bortoletto in the Sauber, admittedly, no one's quite sure where the Sauber is in relation to everything. It's a bit of an enigma, a bit of a mystery. But seeing those two fight and just continuing the battle they had in Formula 2 was so much fun. But they kept it clean, despite the fact they're in Formula 1, they want to prove themselves and have a long-term career in the sport. That was brilliant. Lovely, lovely, lovely. But that bit of debris people thought might have been Isaac, but no. It turns out that it might have actually been Lawson. So it does mean, technically, therefore, you lost a bit of debris, therefore you weren't the cleanest of drivers. So it might raise Hadjar's estimation as well as Tsunoda. Granted, Lawson was able to make up positions, but he wasn't exactly the cleanest by doing so. And speaking of doing, oh yeah, there was that little bit right at the end. Many people might not have noticed that because they might have switched off, or they might have just decided to go on social media and absolutely, tweet about this and go like, oh my god, there's a meeting with Lewis Hamilton, trying to make a move on Bortoletto like Hadjar tried to do after the back straight, and then spinning, and then taking out Gabi with him. So already, yeah, South America really is not enamored with Jack Doohan at the moment. And even though Colapinto's manager has told the South American contingent, the Argentinian fans in particular, to just back off for the moment, it's really not helping Franco's case. This is not helping Jack's case either, coming dead last, whereas Pierre managed to come home 12th. Yeah, 12th isn't really much to write home about, but right now, no one's quite sure where Alpine is. The midfield is just that close, especially since now Haas are back in the game. They're not tied to the back. Oliver Behrman qualifying the highest and finishing higher than Esteban. No one was really expecting that, but we just got to remember, Antonelli and Behrman were relatively close in machinery that was actually representative and arrived on the day, unlike Prema last year. Seriously, that F2 season masks the potential of those two drivers. But the reality is that Jack Doohan is now fighting for his life, and him having a spin and not even finishing the race off the back. Carlos Sainz, during that last minute change to different tyres, he managed to get back up to 17th. So actually not that far off where he ultimately ended up. I mean, Williams, it was a little bit of a confusing situation, but it does go to show that even though they did score some massive points in Australia, there is still work to be done. And I know that many people might be coming for me in the comments saying, so much for the Carlos Sainz revenge arc. But at the very least, the Spaniard at least knows what needs to be fixing. And Albon is right there representing. He has responded well. So that is absolutely brilliant. But all I can say is that if the Australian really wants to keep his seat, this was not the way to go about it, especially when you've got Briatore just rumbling around looking for any sort of excuse to take you down and put the Argentinian in the seat. This is a bit of a blot. After last time out in qualifying, it wasn't too bad. Yes, of course, you had the spin out in Australia, which many other people did, but this time around in the sprint, no one else was really spinning, and then you took Bortoletto out, so therefore the accident was really on you, so he might even get a penalty for causing a collision. And then Lawson had a collision, although it was a little bit of a tap in comparison. But despite all of that, what this has actually proved is that the sprint format is really starting to mature. that there is some reason to keep it around after all. This is what I was seeing in all of the junior categories. The sprint can be really exciting because you have to manage your tyres. And that is something I'm really particularly pleased about Oscar, is that tyre management was one of his biggest weaknesses in 2023. He got the handle of it in 2024, and now this time around, he used it to his benefit and got past Verstappen. Granted, many people would be expecting more and more overtakes. In fact, they would demand more and more overtakes. But sometimes you just want good, clean racing at the same time. And there was a brief moment that I thought Leclerc would have been feisty. I think if there was any opportunity for Charles to respond to the Hamilton pole, it would have been at the start, but he just couldn't get past George. And that is something I have to just consider. George is just the guy who's not really making much noise on the track. I mean, off the track is a whole different story. We all know the sort of things he's been talking about. Oh, blimey, I think McLaren can run away with a championship. And McLaren are like, yeah, calm down, mate. And now they've been proven right, because McLaren, they weren't as imperial as we thought they would be. Again, this might have been down to the FIA being suddenly incredibly rapid to make sure that no one else runs with it. So the FIA being competent, oh my goodness, wow. But Charles Leclerc couldn't do the business. And this is, this is chalk one up for, Lewis Hamilton, because you couldn't really get much of a chalking up in Australia because both Ferraris were equally miserable. This was still one of their worst starts to a season in many years, and the fact they were 7th in the Constructors, well, they ain't no more, so that's absolutely fantastic. I am really pleased to see Lewis doing the business, that he can just knuckle down. He managed to make it convert, and he also then managed to get a win out of it. Granted, it's a sprint win, I know, it doesn't really matter to some people, but this does matter to him. This is a bit of silverware or a plaque or something like that, but it is a victory, and it's a victory in red where there is a huge fan base. That this is basically the Asian Tifosi. I never realized that there were so many fans of Ferrari there, but then again, Zhou Guanyu is the reserve driver, so that would help as well. Oh, by the way, I just still want to mention briefly Zhou Guanyu. Him being there, being rather calm, happy to be mixing it up with Charles and Lewis, being just a means of calm and actually just being there in the social media and influencing. Oh, Zhou, Lewis, how about them collaborating in terms of fashion? Oh, that would be really sweet, wouldn't it? But I'm glad that he's having a good time at the Scuderia. Just goes to show that the Ferrari Driver Academy, it is a place where if you don't make it, they'll find a place for you, unlike the Red Bull Junior program. And that one really needs to be completely reevaluated, because the last time they had any vague junior that was still part of their wheelhouse get on the podium was Pierre Gasly back in 2021. That is a bit of a problem. And that is something, if you haven't watched it already, you can watch. But in any case, the qualifying for the Grand Prix will be coming up very, very soon. And in the meantime, if you found my channel and you're not used to the ladder not being here, I predict that this video here might be to your liking. So I'll see you later.